we are going to go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining us this afternoon for our May Lunch and Learn. I am Amanda Lakin with the Nevada Housing Coalition, and I have just a few announcements before we hand it off to our panelists today. Just a couple upcoming events I want to make sure all of you are aware of. We have a new series that we launched back in March called Housing Insights, and we are going to have our next session on June 16th from 12 to 1 o'clock. And this is going to be about opportunity zones, and we will be welcoming some speakers from HUD. We have our summer housing policy forums that are coming up in July, Monday, July 20th for Southern Nevada and Thursday, July 23rd for Northern Nevada. This is a member exclusive event, so members, please keep your eye out for registration details coming next week. If you are not a member and you're interested in policy, I will drop a link in the chat so you can join the coalition. But this is just going to be a really engaging day where we have all of our members come together to discuss our policy priorities for the 2027 legislative session. Also, our June Lunch and Learn is going to be Wednesday, June 21st. We will be focusing on home ownership. And last but not least, if you have not seen, registration is open for our 2026 Nevada Housing Conference taking place on September 23rd and 24th in Reno. Early bird rates are going to be good through July 31st. And if you are, again, a member of the coalition, we are currently accepting nominations for our annual awards ceremony. We have two different categories available. Anyone who works in affordable housing in Nevada can be nominated, but you must be a member of the coalition to nominate someone. Our current deadline for this is going to be Sunday, May 31st. So if there's anyone that you would like to give kudos to or recognize for their incredible work this year, we hope you submit a nomination by Sunday. So now I'm going to turn it over to David Paul. He is the Executive Vice President of George Chakakis, Inc., and also a member of the Board of Directors for the Nevada Housing Coalition. Take it away, David.
Awesome. Thank you, Amanda. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Nevada Housing Coalition's Lunch and Learn webinar. And thank you, Amanda, for all the work that the Nevada Housing Coalition team does to bring these important conversations to our community. I am David Paul, Executive Vice President for George Chakakis, Inc. We've been a developer of affordable housing in Las Vegas since 1995. We're a developer, contractor, property manager of affordable housing. We're proud of our recent milestones like the ribbon cutting of our West Sahara Senior Living, which is 171 units of senior affordable housing, our upcoming McKnight Senior Village 4, which will open this summer, and then currently under construction, our Tropicana Trails permanent supportive housing development. I'm honored to moderate today's panel. We have an outstanding group of leaders who are actively developing and building affordable housing across Nevada and also nationally. Let me introduce our panelists. Our first panelist is Brian Arbogast, Director of Pre-Construction with Metcalf Builders. Then we have Austin Cates, Vice President of Development at the NRP Group, and Brian Maloney, the Senior Director of Development at Lincoln Avenue Capital. Today's session is designed to be a conversational and interactive discussion. We're going to start by giving each panelist a few minutes to introduce themselves and highlight some of their recent work. So with that, Austin, do you want to go first?
Sure. Great to meet everyone. My name is Austin Cates. I'm the Vice President of Development for the NRP Group in our Southwest markets, which are largely comprised of Nevada and Arizona. The NRP Group started as an affordable housing developer in 1994, so we're just over 30 years young, and currently we're active in about 17 different markets, focusing on both market rate and affordable housing, as well as everything that fits in between. So, that can be comprised of workforce housing, mixed income housing, and really anything you can think of that can creatively fit in the middle there. In our Southwest markets, we are currently under construction on 6 opportunities, 4 of which are in Vegas. One is an affordable project in North Las Vegas. 3 are market rate projects in the Southwest Las Vegas corridor, with a 5th in the pipeline in South Las Vegas that'll actually be a 235 unit senior age-restricted LIHTC project, which we're really excited to bring forth to the community. In Arizona, we're actively pursuing a 4% line tech project in Casa Grande, just south of the Phoenix MSA, as well as under construction on one workforce project, which we put together a creative solution with the city of Phoenix that is 50% of units restricted to 80% AMI, and then the other 50% of units are market rate products. So, when NRP thinks housing, we cover all income targets and look forward to putting forth the best product we can, no matter the income range.
Awesome. Thank you, Austin. We'll keep an alphabetical order here, and we'll go to Brian Arbogast.
Good afternoon. Brian Arbogast, Director of Pre-Construction with Metcalf Builders. I grew up in Laughlin, Nevada. I worked in Vegas for about 14 years, and now I live up in Reno. So I've kind of covered the whole state almost from a live/construction perspective. Metcalf Builders, we're a general commercial contractor specializing in multifamily, hospitality, and industrial type projects. Multifamily, we do both private and public affordable type projects. I think right now we have about 6 active affordable projects across the state in various stages of construction. In Vegas, we're working on the Marble Manor, the historic West Side. I know it's a pretty important project for the community. We're finishing up the Lake Mead micro business, the residential piece behind the micro business building, also in off the Lake Mead area. And then we've got 3 or 4 active affordable projects in Northern Nevada. So thank you for allowing me to speak today.
Great. Thank you, Brian. Now, Brian Maloney.
Hi, I'm Brian Maloney. I'm a Senior Director of Development at Lincoln Avenue Communities. Lincoln Avenue Communities is the nation's largest affordable housing developer in 2024 and 2025. And we have a presence in about 33 states and about a portfolio of over 200 communities serving about 85,000 residents across the country. So within Nevada, we have a presence just in Washoe County for now, but we're working on expanding that with about 5 communities in the Reno area. And our latest project is going to be a built-to-rent community in Fernley, Nevada, which we expect to hope to close later this year. In my role, I kind of oversee Lincoln Avenue Communities, Nevada development efforts, as well as a few other states around the country. And prior to LAC, I worked for another affordable housing developer, Vitus, in Seattle area, which specializes in acquisition rehabs. So thank you for inviting me to be on this panel.
Excellent. Thank you, Brian. All right, we're going to dive right in here. So I'm going to ask the first question here, and we'll stick with you, Brian, which is why do you think that this work is so important right now?
I think this work is so important right now, especially in Nevada, just because there is such a need for it. I mean, I think, in a lot of communities around the country that we develop in, they're not necessarily excited about affordable housing development because they aren't sure about the need and all these other things. That just isn't our experience working in Nevada. I think everyone's pretty clear on that we need, or at least in my mind, the people we've talked to are pretty clear that we need more affordable housing development in general as well, which we're a part of. So I think it's more important than ever to, just get more production. So.
Okay. Austin, same question for you.
Yeah, no, I think this industry, has always been important, but, over the past 6-7 years with the COVID run up and inflation and volatility in housing and in markets, affordable housing is, an avenue that can provide security for families and security for people that, our economies and communities rely on, the workforce, the teachers, the nurses, construction personnel, so many people that keep all industries going. To be able to provide, a security, a housing security for those folks and many others is more important now than ever, just given the volatility and really the cost of ownership, the cost of housing in general has spiked dramatically, and NRP and the others on this panel are certainly grateful and happy to be able to fill that void in the market that's existed, and look forward to continuing to build more housing that can provide the support for the communities that it's much needed.
Great. Thank you, Austin. Now, Brian, same question for you.
Well, they both kind of spoiled my thunder. But part of our mission is to positively impact, communities in which we do business. And I don't know what, impacts a community more than affordable housing. I mean, we did a groundbreaking the other day, and one of the owners one of the developers we work for said we're potentially giving someone a bed that wouldn't have one otherwise. So I love to build, but to build something like that with a group that is so committed to just providing a much needed service, it's just, it's just very impactful. So.
Great. Brian M., you mentioned that, Nevada seems to be more positive than other communities that you work in as far as their view of affordable housing. Do you have any insight on why that might be?
I mean, I think just people are, when you have such a, when people don't have a place to live or don't have a place they can afford to live, where they're spending, typically our affordability standard is we like people to be spending about 30% of their income on rent, I think is standard. So as, as rents are rising and incomes aren't, people are hearing from their, elected officials, or hearing from their constituents like, hey, we need something to happen here. And so people saying like, hey, my kids are graduating college, they can't afford to live here, they're going to move somewhere else. And companies saying, hey, we can't, our workforce can't afford to live here. It's not, maybe we will consider locating our business somewhere cheaper. I think when elected officials hear that, it's clear to them, okay, we need to do something about this problem. So I think in other places, maybe where there isn't as much of a steep demand as in Nevada, people aren't hearing that as much. So
okay, great. So we'll kick it over to Brian A. What are your biggest challenges right now?
Well, workforce, labor availability is a challenge for us as builders. Sure. It's no surprise to anybody. Reno specifically, Northern Nevada has a big data center boom that's going on out at the Tahoe Reno Industrial Center. So we're struggling a little bit to find manpower for some of these larger multifamily projects that we have. So we're reaching out regionally. I mean, we're figuring it out, but that's part of the early collaboration and just pre-construction engagement that we try to do is hey, who's going to build it? And where are we going to get the people to build it, right? And so just workforce continues to be a challenge. And I know that that's more of a national challenge right now, but it's something that we're seeing throughout the state. Infrastructure and utility availability has also been a challenge. We try to engage early, and the first thing we start asking about is power availability for some of these projects. Once again, mission critical has kind of power is very strained up here. So utility infrastructure and needs is something that we try to work through really early on projects. It's stalled a couple projects out. I mean, just there's no power right now, right? So it's like, how do we work around that? It's like, well, we have some projects that are proceeding hoping that they figure it out. They got 2 years to figure it out. So it's like, it's a big risk to proceed with some of these jobs without having confirmed infrastructure capacity in some metrics. Getting these projects to pencil. I mean, it's construction costs are high right now. Labor costs are high right now. Going back to the point of just early pre-construction engagement, we try to understand the owner's budget early. We try to look at their pro forma and look at the design and kind of try to offer some efficiencies to get this thing to pencil. The last thing we want to do is go down the road with all these, financing approvals and yep, the land's purchased and we're ready to go just for a project to not pencil and the land to sit for however many years until it gets figured out. So those are probably the top 3 ones right now, David, that we're trying to work through. And we are figuring it out, but those are just challenges that we, push through each day.
Are you having the same labor issues in Southern Nevada versus Northern Nevada, or is it a little easier down here?
I think Southern Nevada is easier. I mean, if you look at just the population, I mean, what is Clark County? 2 million plus, I think, where Northern Nevada is, 500,000. So just the labor availability is much more. It's just less in Northern Nevada, right? So it's just harder to find labor more in Northern than Southern. Yeah, for sure.
Okay, good to know. Austin, same question. What are your biggest challenges right now?
Yeah, I feel like our biggest challenge in Southern Nevada is, land availability and land pricing, as it relates to affordable housing. Obviously, limited land to go around in Southern Nevada between BLM land, air zone flight paths, et cetera. And so, getting to a pro forma that's actionable with the sites that are available. Now, the state has had, resources that has helped us get there and really enabled us to move forward on the two projects that we're actively pursuing. But, for new opportunities, and it's always, what resources will be available at a state or county level to help us bridge that gap in our pro formas. The demand's definitely there. And so it's really having everything align along a timeline that aligns. Everyone knows these aren't quick projects to put together, and so there's certainly an art of timing, of having your land with the funding, and interest rates not working against you, and all other factors out there. So really getting the stars to align is critical to getting these projects off the ground.
Excellent. And you mentioned land prices, and since I see we have a federal represent or a federal staffer on the webinar, how much of a difference would it make to have land and eligible basis for tax credit projects?
Huge. Yeah, huge opportunity, to the extent, that's an option on the table. Some ways we've tried to, um, get creative are ground leases, to, defer some of the land payment to project cash flow, partnerships, with cities specifically to, have them have some skin in the game, and can all sometimes result in, more resources being brought to the table. So, really anything helps related to land. And, I know we're actively trying to pursue creative structures to bring these projects to fruition.
Okay, and since I'm on you right now, I see a question in the chat that says, with the 50% test moving to 25%, how are you filling the gap in the capital stack? Anything creative working better than expected?
The 50% going to 25% was huge, especially in markets where volume cap has been a challenge. In Arizona specifically, I know, getting away from Nevada for a second, we were looking at, 25% of projects applying for volume cap getting awarded, and, having an eligible project just based when the 50% test was in play. And so opening the door to now more projects getting funding and allowing for developers to get creative has resulted and will result in a lot more affordable housing being built. And I know Nevada has done something similar in their QAP to govern a 30% test cap. So it does, create a higher cost of capital for the project, given limiting tax exempt financing. But with recycled bonds as well, we've found creative ways to kind of get back to that 50 to 60% tax exempt financing, even if um, all the dollars aren't coming from this specific year's volume cap. And so, creative solutions like that, where maybe a couple years ago the recycled volume cap wasn't an option on the table, in this year and maybe upcoming years, with the tests going down to 25% and then a cap at 30%, that's definitely been an avenue we've explored to help our pro formas.
Okay, great. Brian M., what have been your biggest challenges?
I think our biggest challenges have been with the creation of the 25% test that has created a lot more projects. So, as Austin mentioned, in states where there were volume cap constraints previously, essentially twice as many projects can be built, more or less, math wise. And I think syndicators and federal equity investors are taking advantage of that because there isn't twice the demand to purchase the credits. So what that results in to us is where someone would have been offered us 85 cents a year ago. Now we're at, how does 78 cents work? And at the same time, with the 30% test, as Austin mentioned, now we have taxable, a larger portion of our debt is going to be taxable. So we'll be paying a higher interest rate because there's less bonds for the project. And kind of one solution we found, and this is actually our project in Fernley, is going to be I believe the first recycled bond project in Nevada. We're going to close on basically preserving our Pinion Apartments project, which was, just finished completion in November. We're going to take 15.5 million of volume cap from that project and preserve it using an escrow structure for the Fernley project closing, which is happening later this year. So just having to get a little bit more creative. That's something, that we probably wouldn't have considered doing a year ago, but just with the spread of taxable to tax exempt debt, just doing everything to get more tax exempt proceeds into the deal. So.
Okay, great. I'm going to go over to Brian A here because I see a question in the chat that you might be able to answer. You mentioned infrastructure. So the question is, what would rural Nevada need to demonstrate, whether in infrastructure, partnerships, incentives, workforce, or quality of life, to capture your attention for future projects?
That's an interesting question. I don't know. We try to team up with clients early that are interested in land. We try to look at infrastructure availability. As far as workforce and availability, we try to pre-qualify our trade partners. Some of these projects are really large that require quite a few number of workforce people versus, we do 30, 40 unit projects as well. So we can tailor that to, the availability. Infrastructure, it's kind of a shot in the dark depending on the land, I guess. I don't have more information on that one.
Okay, I'm going to stick with you. And so as a builder in an environment with rising costs, what have you found effective in trying to keep costs relatively low or increasing at a slower rate?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, through pre-con, we always look at early procurement items to consider, right? We're trying to stay on the latest trends of what materials going up. We usually get notifications early within 6 to 3 months that certain things are going to start ticking up. We try to work with developers on more open spec type products. So when we look at a mechanical system, if they're specing a very specific manufacturer, we always kind of say, well, are you open to an alternate manufacturer, right? Because maybe there's a better not a better product, but a similar product we can get from this manufacturer that's just more local, or they're maybe a little more competitively priced. Understand that some owners have their brands and they have what they want, and hey, that's fine. We'll go source it. We'll keep it as competitive as we can. But so we try to keep it open sourced, right? That allows us to be a little flexible on the product, which usually helps with pricing. As far as material escalation, we try really hard once we get under contract with the client to buy out the project as soon as possible. We kind of have a 90-day buyout, 90%, 90 days is what we shoot for. So once we can buy the project out and lock that pricing in with our trade partners, that's always a goal so that we don't have these escalation surprises through construction. And then, like I said, through early procurement, we're talking to clients sometimes about early deposits on electrical gear, elevators when it's applicable, just so we can start locking in those numbers.
Excellent. Now, also, are you doing any projects under BABA right now?
So we've looked into BABA. We've had a couple that are unique, that are specific to steel sourced products. A full BABA project we have not done yet. We started to go down the road, and then the whole Doji thing happened. And I understand that you used to be able to get quite a few variances for BABA, because a full BABA project, it's very difficult to achieve. And so we've dipped into it a little bit, David, but not a full BABA project yet. But I'm sure it's coming.
Okay. I'll throw this up to Austin and Brian because I think both of you probably are dealing with BABA somewhere around the country. Austin, what is the impact been of BABA on construction costs and materials and availability and all of that?
Yeah, and surprisingly, we haven't had in the markets I work in, we actually haven't had to go down that path. And you know, one reason may be because it is so challenging, and just the resources that would trigger that type of requirement haven't been available, at least in the Arizona market. And so, kind of alluding, following Brian's comments, it is certainly more expensive and tougher to make projects pencil unless there's ample resources available. But on a personal experience, I haven't had to go down that path for any of our projects in the Southwest.
Okay. Brian M, have you had any experience with BABA yet?
I have not had any experience either, so just have not chased any funding sources where that was a requirement. So
Okay. Well, lucky you. Lucky you. We're gonna go back to Austin here. I guess as a national developer, what are some unique ways NRP has seen jurisdictions work with developers to incentivize workforce housing?
Yeah, I think a couple different avenues, some more creative than others. And, I think just starting off at project inception is maybe implementing something in their code like a density bonus. For example, in some cities in Arizona, there's, if you offer 10% of units at 80% AMI, you can get a 20% density bonus on the zoning in place for that project. Further, fee waivers, development fee waivers, in some markets, impact fee waivers are on the table. Expedited review processes go a long way. Back to one of my prior comments of getting everything to align from a timing perspective is sometimes the most, a big hurdle in putting these projects together. So, if you can realize efficiencies from the city process, and be able to rely on those to fit into sometimes a tight timeline with funding availability. Those are some mechanisms within the city's control that can be, outlined in their code and implemented at a early level in the project that, makes our jobs a little bit easier, at least a little bit more predictable. And then, on a more creative front, we've looked at existing tools in cities kind of jurisdictions to use, sometimes fall within the economic development department, but tools that cities can use to incentivize economic development, but also could be used for housing of sorts. And that's where in the city of Phoenix, we've utilized an economic development tool called the Government Property Lease Excise Tax Program, where a city takes ownership of the land and then leases it back to the developer. And for that project specifically, we are offering 50% or restricting 50% of our units at 80% AMI. So without, and then as government property owned land, we're property tax abated. So without, the willingness to get creative and the willingness to, remove our property from the tax roll in exchange for offering a public benefit to the workforce of the Phoenix MSA, these structures aren't always intuitive or easy, but the public benefit is there. And so, having cities that are willing to kind of roll up their sleeves and be open to new ideas and then investigating it through, legal lenses of the feasibility is something that we welcome in all markets. And we do something similar in Texas called in the PFC structure, where it's 50% of units at 80% AMI. And property taxes in Texas are, extremely, big number relative to maybe a Phoenix or Nevada. And so, implementing structures like that, even if it's 20% of units at 80% MI for a 50% property tax abatement, there's a solution, at some point that works for everybody, and trying to find that common ground and be motivated to be motivated to consider something new is certainly something that could result in more affordable workforce units in these markets.
Great. Is that government lease of the land back to you? Is that at a market rate or is that at a discounted rate?
So it depend in Arizona, it's a little unique. If you're in the central business district, it's 100% property tax abatement. So there's really no lease payment besides offering a public benefit that would be greater to equivalent or greater than the property tax savings that the developer receives. If it's in a more suburban location, it's over a 25-year period, and it's at an excise tax rate that is published on an annual basis, which is based on gross square footage. So for our specific project, it equated to about a 65% property tax abatement, which was enough for us to be able to have a portion of our units set aside for affordable rent levels.
Okay, excellent. I'm going to throw this over to Brian M. I know you're working on a unique project in Fernley, Nevada. Why don't you tell us about that project and some of the challenges you've run into?
Sure, yeah. So we are working on a 293 unit, what we call a build to rent community. So typically when we refer to build to rent, it's referring to either single family homes or duplex homes. So this would be will be a duplex home community. And so something uniquely challenging that has come up for us is in the 21st Century Road to Housing Act, at least the Senate passed version, there was a provision saying, basically making our project illegal because affordable housing development requires us as the developer to have a period of minimum of 15 years and mandatory 30 years of affordability, but we have to be the owners of the project for 15 years. And so what the Senate version of the bill required was a forced sale in year 7. So what that would require us, essentially would be impossible to fit our project under the LIHTC program and also comply with that program. So that's been a unique kind of challenge for us just to convince, because, we have, in order to get to a closing later this year, we have to convince our, capital potential lenders and equity investors that our project type is not going to be illegal once we build it. So just that's been a lot of fun conversations around that. We are confident though that in the House version of the legislation they fixed that. So I guess now the House and Senate need to go to conference and work out the differences between their bills. But we are hopeful that that 7-year forced sale provision is going to be eliminated from the final version of the bill. Because if not, I guess I should say we'll have to find a way to completely redesign our project and to what we think would be basically a worse product type. We would probably move back to more of a traditional multifamily instead of kind of the build to rent, duplex style we want to bring to the community. So that's been a unique challenge for us. Another unique challenge for us has been water rights acquisition. And never knew it was going to be such an issue going into this, but Fernley has, due to all the industrial development going on in the area, data centers in manufacturing, the demand to purchase water rights has been basically extreme. People were telling us a year ago an acre foot was selling for, $12,000. You could find them. Now we're getting offered, people who want to sell their water rights to us at $25,000 an acre feet, and we need to purchase over 105 for our project. So that's been a huge cost increase for us. And just, it's been frankly challenging to find those water rights. So I think that has been very, very surprising piece of development for us out there. So
I think that's a pretty unique challenge for that area that we don't have down in Southern Nevada. So why did you do duplexes versus the more traditional multifamily? What made you select that?
I think it was, it where we're building there, while there was kind of one existing apartment complex down the street, we felt just the duplexes would fit better within the existing neighborhood footprint. and also felt that, it was a market that we felt like we wanted to kind of differentiate ourselves a little bit because we see ourselves, in Fernley, if you work at the Tahoe Reno Industrial Center, you can live in Reno, or, there's obviously a lot of communities you can live in, but for us, it's, you can live in Reno, or you could also maybe consider living in Fernley. So we wanted to pitch a product that we felt was, especially for the price point, was, better for your money than anything else you could get in Reno or Fernley as well. So that's kind of why we led us down that design path.
Okay, excellent. I'm going to stick with you and then throw this one to the group, but we have a question. It says, can you talk about the types and sizes of units you are building? Where is the demand, the gap? Studios, multi-generational homes, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, single-family homes, higher density, what kind of community spaces are you building? Accessibility and those type of things.
So I think we're seeing a lot of demand for, based on what we're seeing in our market study, we're pitching actually a good amount of 4-bedroom units in our Fernley project, just because to us, it's kind of a little bit of an unmet demand, just because, if you're not renting our community for $1,500 a month for a 4-bedroom, maybe your other best option is $2,500 a month to rent a single family home, just because it's a little bit, most market rate developers don't want to do a 4-bedroom apartment unit just because it's challenging to design and build. So there's a lot less of them in the market. So we feel like that is kind of an unmet market demand, and really try and fit in as many as we can in each development.
Okay, great. Austin?
Yes, similar response. We've seen in a lot of our markets, especially our Sunbelt markets, where, cost of home ownership has increased quite a bit. We are certainly offering more 3 and 4-bedroom units, and, really more 4-bedroom units than we ever have. And, they seem to be being absorbed and are responded well in the marketplace. And then, I think, as we shift to more 3 and 4s, we still have a lot of demand for 1s and 2s as well. So definitely see a lot of demand and the opportunity to deliver 3s and 4s, but the 1s seem to continue to go off the rack extremely quick in almost all projects that we build.
Okay. Brian A., you want to chime in?
Yeah, I mean, I think the same thing. I mean, we build a little bit of everything. I mean, humbly, we've got some small 29 unit, projects. We do 50 units. We just broke ground on a 400 unit deal that's a 3-story garden style. Most of these projects, the ground up, have a nice mix of the studio 1-bedroom to, a little bit of 3, 4 bedrooms. We're starting to see a little bit there. To Brian and Austin's point on just being able to afford a home, I am seeing a lot more of the townhome products start to get rolled out for rent, because families they don't want to live in an apartment. They've got some kids. They want a little more space, but they can't afford a house. So, these townhome product is also a much needed product in the market that we're starting to see get rolled out as well. So it's really a mix. I mean, as far as densities, I would imagine developers try to get as dense as you can, maybe a little, not crazy, but, certain codes, certain restrictions, parking goes into account, but we definitely look at densities early and try to maximize that, as well as amenities. And so just a combination of everything.
Now, do you find that residents would prefer a bigger unit versus less amenities, or more amenities versus a smaller unit?
And that's a good question, because I've built both. I've built micro units with create amenities, and I've built, bigger units where you're averaging on a garden style, a 1,200 square foot unit size, and the amenities are limited. So I really think it's all about, the end user and what their needs are. I had a client that put all the money in the units, high end flooring, high end appliances, and very low end amenities, because they kind of said once the person moves in, they really don't go in the clubhouse anymore. They kind of focus on their unit. And then I've had developers do the opposite. They enhance the amenities and turn it into like a day spa, and the units are very just normal kind of, market rate finishes. And so I think it's a combination of just the developers' brands and needs, and maybe even some market-driven decisions there.
Okay. All right. Brian M. Lincoln Avenue Communities works in 30 states, I believe. How would you compare demand for affordable housing in Nevada to some of the other states that you work in?
Yeah, I would say Nevada has unquestionably one of the largest demands that we see. I would say, especially in Northern Nevada, where we've done a lot of our development work, it's, typically, our investment metric we look at just to show, which I think shows the need, is kind of spread to market from your market rate rents to affordable rents. And in a lot of municipalities around the country, we feel like that spread has been, frankly reduced, or it's pretty tight, which makes it a lot tougher to, basically make our developments feasible and pencil in those markets versus, Reno has its own unique challenges of just, construction costs being so high, which I think, leads to, on the macro level, leads to higher rents overall, because in a lot of markets, like Texas, for example, it's a lot cheaper and easier to build. You can, the market rate developers, all sorts of developers can just, they think there's an unmet demand. They can quickly, just throw up some more units, while it's a lot more challenging in a lot of Nevada markets because, frankly, there isn't as much land and construction prices are high. So that automatically creates a constraint on how much supply can be brought on. So, frankly, from our perspective, it just, we need as much as it can get in a lot of Nevada markets, as much as we can build. So
okay, I have a question in the chat here. It's asked, can you speak to how energy costs fit into your financing?
For the majority of our projects, I should say energy costs are typically paid by the residents, and so they get their rent standard is based on 30% of their income paying towards a rent plus utilities. So if utilities are particularly expensive in a market, that utility allowance gets larger, so the net rent to us as a developer would be lower, and which makes our project harder to pencil. But typically our largest utility expenses as the developer owner are water and sewer. So our performers are very, very sensitive to local, water sewer rates. So as those go up, it makes our projects harder to pencil. So,
and kind of along the same line there, were you impacted at all by the 156 million community solar funds for Nevada that were impounded, that are no longer available to us?
We were not, because we did not when we started our previous project, the Pinion Apartments, which finished in November, like, we never contemplated solar there. I think it was just a little bit early for that. And we're looking at it for a few other opportunities, but they never got far enough along to where we plan to use that as a source. So we were fortunate there, to not be relying on that. So.
Okay. I'm going to throw that to Brian A. Can you speak to energy costs in your financing? How do you view that?
Well, from a construction standpoint, we really focus on the infrastructure. We might carry, obviously, utility usage during construction, right, which is usually an estimate based off a certain amount of kilowatts for temp power. But the infrastructure costs that we try to put in place, that's why we really push for an early engagement with like NV Energy to get the design complete. Let's say traditionally we would go to contract without the dry utilities being designed, the gas and the power and even the communication systems, because we would just carry an allowance and then kind of work through it, during construction. But now, sometimes the offsite infrastructure needs of taking some of these overhead lines underground or something like that, sometimes it throws a little curveball at us from just carrying a budget perspective. We got to go back to the client and say, hey, we carried X, but once we finally got the design, it's Y, and how do we work through this? So I think from us, it's more of the cost for the infrastructure from a power, utility standpoint. And we just try to have as much information as we can before we sign our GMP, so that we just don't have any surprises during construction. We got to work with the client to try to work around.
All right, Austin, same question for you.
Yeah, I mean we're in a similar boat as Brian M said. Utility costs, energy costs are directly correlated to our pro forma both on the expense side but also on the revenue side. And so, as we cover a portion of as we have a utility allowance for our residents and a ceiling on what we can charge, it ends up coming back to the developer to take on a larger chunk or forego some revenue, which leads to a greater gap in our pro formas. So we've had great partners that allowed us to that have awarded us gap financing to enable us to get shovels in the ground. But as utilities and energy costs continue to increase, the pro forma gets increasingly challenged, and we'll certainly continue to rely on our partners to help us work through these challenges.
Okay, I can say from our perspective, we're looking at paying utilities now for all of our projects going forward, but we are covering every square inch with solar. So the loss of any funding for solar is a big impact. We find that, you know, with utility costs going up for our residents, it has a significantly negative impact where they don't know what their bill is from month to month. So we're continuing to look at paying those utilities, but any resources that we lose are it's a big hit. So let's see. So what have been some success, and I'll stay with you, Austin. What have been some real successes for you, and where do you see the industry headed in the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, I mean, success is, NRP has entered the Nevada market in 2022, and so our to kind of celebrate our pipeline here, we have a project under construction in the city of North Las Vegas, and we received gap funding from Clark County and City of North Las Vegas and NHD, and so we're super appreciative of the partners that have decided to work with us to bring these projects to fruition, and similarly have Clark County CHF funds on our project in South Las Vegas, our senior project. So to celebrate continued partnerships in these markets, and we're super appreciative of the entities that have leaned into the work we're putting forth, and and then on the market rate side, to have 3 projects under construction. And NRP's mission is to deliver exceptional communities across no matter the income levels, and so we've been able to do that in the state of Nevada. And so to celebrate that is certainly something that we don't take like lightheartedly. And then going forward, we look to continue to build relationships in the state of Nevada, and from a 3 to 5 year outlook, figure out creative solutions, maybe opportunities that don't exist today, and collectively we can work together to figure out unique structures or unique scenarios or unique opportunities, and use all of our minds and resources to figure out how to continue kind of the mission of building affordable housing in the state of Nevada.
Okay, excellent. Brian A, same question.
Yeah, I mean, I think some great successes for our group is, we made a decision a few years ago and pivoted to get into the affordable market, and we were welcomed. I mean, since then we've probably put over 1,000 units in various stages of construction in the state, and we're really successful. And I like the fact that I think developers are really starting to engage contractors early through more of a collaborative pre-construction approach. Traditionally we would talk to a developer, they'd already have a set of plans designed, we bid it, and as of late the project's over budget, it's a redesign, it's just a lot of inefficiencies with that. But we're able to come in early, we almost come in same time a designer does, and we kind of act as that like third-legged stool, right, where we're just collaboratively working together as a group, as a team to design an efficient, on budget, nice project that the community is going to enjoy for many years to come.
All right, Brian M.
Yeah, I think we were extremely proud to basically get our project in Reno, the Pinion Apartments built. It was developed in a particularly challenging time and really wouldn't have been possible without the Home Means Nevada funding, which our project received, as well as very generous, impact fee waivers from the city of Reno. We received over $1 million discount for our sewer impact fees, which was, a huge investment by the city in our project and really made our project possible. So I think really that was just getting that built through a extremely challenging time and completed and hopefully finished leasing up later this summer we're extremely proud of that as a company. So.
Awesome. Now, Brian, I believe you are getting NAHA funds for your Fernley project. Is that right?
We are, yes.
So what kind of a difference does that make in that particular development?
I mean, I think it's really just the difference between our product moving forward and our product not. So it still continues to be a challenging time to develop in Nevada because, as I mentioned before, just construction, with the passing of the 30% of the 25% test, and equity pricing going down and your debt becoming more expensive, and just construction pricing, as Brian mentioned before, continues to be, a little bit elevated from where we'd like it to be, just due to all the industrial development demands in Northern Nevada. Frankly, it's just, otherwise we would have kind of a gap we wouldn't be able to fill with private sources. So really it's the difference between our product moving forward and not. And I believe I think the division mentioned that the category we applied in was like 20 times oversubscribed or something along those lines. So I think it shows that there's still more work than can be done because, it would be great if all these projects could be built because there's certainly a demand for them. But for us, it's, really it's the project. It was a, yes or no move forward point for us. So.
That's great. So you would be supportive of the legislature funding or adding more funds in the next session?
Most definitely, yes. I think yeah, without a doubt, because there's such a demand for more affordable housing development and just housing development of all kinds. Because I know just a unique part of it is it's not just for affordable housing; it's for single family home for sale as well. So there's a lot of utilization of those funds, which I think you could probably speak to because I believe you're on the board administering those funds, David. But it's just, very supportive of more funding. So.
And Austin, I believe NRP got some funds too. Am I correct?
Not NAHA, but we've been recipients of other funds and, would certainly welcome more more funding through the legislative process. And, without that, our projects wouldn't be feasible. So once again, super appreciative to have gotten the awards. And, we'll continue to bring projects forward to compete for future awards to the extent funding's available, because, that's really what's critical to getting these projects started.
Okay, I have a question here. I'm curious myself. Has anyone ever been able to get discounted financing through the Federal Home Loan Bank's Community Investment Cash Advance or Community Investment Program? I'm guessing no, because I'm not aware of anybody in Nevada who has.
We have not. So.
Okay, excellent. And then I guess maybe one more question here because we're coming to the end of the session. The Nevada Housing Division has put in a floor of 80 cents for tax credit pricing. If you want to get, funding from the division, has this had impact, positive or negative? No impact? What are you seeing?
We've been, fortunate to get pricing in the mid 80s for our project in South Las Vegas, but in other markets we've certainly crossed below that 80-cent mark, and it's challenging. So I think as a developer, even if you do cross below that threshold, we would still welcome the opportunity to have a path forward versus kind of be excluded from from trying to problem solve or put forth a project that could potentially start. But it's definitely certainly not uncharted territory in the current market to fall below that 80%, 80 cent mark.
Okay. Would you think it would make sense at a federal level to put in a floor for tax credit pricing, or going back to 2010-ish when the federal government actually exchanged credits directly with the state? I think Nevada got 85 cents a credit or something like that. Since we have some federal people online here, you think that would be something that should be explored at a federal level?
I don't think a price floor would be effective federal policy. I think, it's with the everything that's happened with the 25% test passing, as I mentioned before, there's kind of more, a lot more opportunities for investment that federal syndicators have. So as frustrating as it can be for us as developers that need the best pricing possible to make our project work, I think, to our, a project that still moves forward at 78 cents and has an offer there versus no offer because no one would be interested in it at the yield that we're offering, is still better than, I guess, 78 cents is better than nothing, put it that way. And I think just naturally as, pricing goes down and yields increase, it brings more people into the market that, besides banks that have a specific CRA need. So just, if brings investors into the market that are chasing a certain yield, I would say. And so, we need more people investing in light tech, not less. And I think an unintended consequence would be less equity coming into the market, which would make, less projects get built. So I personally would not recommend that, but.
Now, do you think the federal government should go back to having an exchange program itself where they exchange directly with the states as opposed to putting in a pricing floor?
I think that would be certainly a unique. I feel like I'm not well enough studied on how that previously worked in order to, speak to that. But I think it's certainly an interesting concept and has some potential to be explored. So,
All right, well, we are running towards the end here, but any last words from the three of you?
Appreciate the thoughtful questions, David and Amanda. Thank you for organizing this. I think, both Brian's and I appreciate the opportunity to share information about our company, our projects, and share what knowledge we have with the community, and all in the hopes of, making this industry as best as possible and delivering as much housing for the community as possible.
Well said. Thank you.
yeah, well said. Yeah, thank you. Thanks again for hosting this panel, David, and Amanda for inviting us to be on this panel. So.
Yeah, thank you, Austin, Brian, and Brian. Really appreciate you guys, your insights. And we look forward to seeing everybody next month for a lunch and learn. And I will throw it back to Amanda.
I was just going to say the same thing. Thank you all. Wonderful discussion. You guys covered a lot of different topics. Thank you. And as David said, we'll see you next month at the next Lunch and Learn. Bye all. Have a great afternoon.